distinguished guests, I am at a loss for words. Usually I speak with my brush or my chisel. After such an introduction, it's very difficult to humble oneself to a status of normality. So in case I sleep on any uncivilized words, you will forgive me for it. But I want to be in front of you as natural as possible and just give you a light what it means to be an Ethiopian artist, an African artist, who has passed and has been lucky enough to experience all the great teaching places, including museums where you see world masterpieces like Mona Lisa by Da Vinci in France, and the Last Judgment of Michelangelo in St. Peter's in Rome, and some of the magnificent works of Francesco de Goya of Spain. Having passed through all this, thanks to a scholarship known as the Prix de Rome, it was the last important scholarship I won in England at the Slade, which is part of the University of London, that gave you a chance to travel after your studies for 3 to 6 months in France, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain and Portugal. So I benefited by all these experiences, feeling so ambitious to go back to my country, begin a school of thought, a school of creativity, where, lucky enough to have been born from Ethiopia, which is next to Egypt, almost 5,000 years of existence and contributing to the world with her heritage, to suddenly appear in that scene and say to yourself, with all the advantage of learning, all the advantage of the great professors that I have had, that now, what am I going to contribute? Am I going to become just a typical local artist, copying what the Europeans at that time, tourists required, a copy of the old works? Or am I going to create something based on my own tradition, on African tradition, and also on world art heritage tradition? These were the big questions that confronted me when I reached my homeland. I could have, of course, with the advice of many students that I have been with, they say, what are you going to do in Africa? It is such a dark continent. They have no time for art. Their life is very difficult. Their ordinary existence is very difficult. Why don't you stay in Paris? Why don't you stay in London? Why don't you go to New York, where you will be able to create peacefully, tranquilly, instead of thinking of your everyday life? Who is going to appreciate your art? They have their own daily problems. A young man, talented as you are, having had the benefit of knowledge and education, why don't you benefit? After all, Picasso, in the Revolution time, he came to France and called it home. Marc Chagall from Russia, he called it home. Diego Rivera of Mexico called it home. So you can't stay in Paris, enjoy the life, enjoy all the benefits of civilization as a cultured man, as an artist, and yet tomorrow, if you create something great, they said that you will always give to your continent and to your country a name, because people would refer to you, Afwerk Tekle from Ethiopia, from Africa. They said you have paid for your debts, but this never happened. This is why I will try to find some words to put you in my position, how I felt. The choice was very, very, very difficult. But I had to decide because Ethiopia and Ethiopians, it is not like today. They never wanted to travel into any other land. They never wanted to conquer other places. But their integrity and their pride, if anybody dare touch it, they will not be sleeping with their spears and shields while somebody else took their country and their possession and their history. They fought for it. This only happened once in the history of Ethiopia. That was fascist Italy, who wanted to colonize Ethiopia, changed her history. It was at that time unknown to many. A sense of heroism was created, patriotism was created, and thanks to these people, Ethiopia was never conquered. The Italians ruled only the cities, not the countryside. Our patriots resisted to a point of their death or liberty. And so I felt I had that drop, a drop of that blood. What am I going to contribute to that land in Africa? And that's why I stayed, went back to Ethiopia. It was a wonderful time because we had an emperor who had a certain sense of clairvoyance and appreciated beautiful things. And for the first time, he opened my exhibition, and I said, as was traditional in Ethiopia, you never sold a picture. You gave to someone, and that somebody gave you money or a bullock or land. But it was considered a kind of shamefulness to say, you pay me for my painting or for my sculpture. Those who served our church, the Coptic church, they stayed in the grave house, most of them, but they created for the church, they created for God. That was their form of payment. They also never signed their paintings because that was also considered a personal glorification. I don't know if you can hear. I didn't touch anything. So I was coming into this place. At that time in Ethiopia, unless you were appointed or you were a prince or you were appointed to a position of a minister, etc., etc., you were practically nothing. And for art, for an artist, well, that was a secondary thing. So I said to myself, I have got all the greatest teachers in my own country, in Europe. I have benefited by that. If I cannot face this situation and make it my second point, not only to create, but to restore the dignity of the artist, the dignity of art, that Europe is firing. You had sales, you had prices were going up. How am I going to change that to make it worthwhile for those painters who are coming after me, so that they don't face these problems that I am facing today? I said, okay, so many hours for creation, so many hours for fighting to restore the position of art and artists. And then the third point, that sooner or later